So you're probably wondering why I've gathered you all here today.
We gotta talk about these mannerists. I mean, they call themselves artists. I think not. I mean, look at this!
Time for a little history lesson for our newest members to remind us of our roots as a group. Our Brotherhood was founded by 3 noble individuals who crossed paths at the Royal Academy of the Arts in London. The first of the founders, Daniel Rossetti, dreamed the idea of this brotherhood because the further he progressed in his formalized training, the more he grew displeased with what he was studying. He was uninspired by the tedious copying that training was based upon and the rigid rules that governed it. He found his first member when his curiosity was piqued by a work named The Eve of St. Agnes by a man named William Holman Hunt, who shared his passion and disdain and thus established a vital relationship to the launch of this movement. Upon his arrival at the Royal Academy, Hunt too was disappointed by the quality of content that was offered. He was inspired by a Russkian emphasis on truth to nature, as well as moral and social symbolism in his works of his peers, much of which was not available to him through his formal training. However, his most vital contribution to this brotherhood was his strong moral conviction and Christian affinities. These convictions were what led to the addition of the final founding member of the Brotherhood, John Everett Millay. Both he and Hunt condemned modern art for its grandiose disregard of the simplicity of truth, the pompous posturing of the apostles, and the unspiritual attitudinizing of the Savior. Thus, the trio made a perfect whole. Hunt had faith, Rossetti had eloquence, and Millay had talent. Rossetti was more of a poet, Millay more of a painter, Hunt more of a Christian. Where one lacked a particular delicacy, the others could compensate for it, which ultimately contributed to the success of our group.
Human beings do not look like this. Her neck is 3 feet long, and Christ as a baby just looks like a tiny man, not a baby. And where are her shoulders? Because she definitely doesn't have any. Mannerists decided that the best form of art is where humanity and all its variations are depicted in its ideal form, like the ancient Greeks. In doing this, Mannerist paintings often feature rigid and hyperflexible poses that most likely would never occur in reality, abnormally small and oval-shaped faces, and no specific focal point. The Madonna of the long neck characterizes these attributes, in that the Virgin Mary's head is disproportionate to her neck, and her bottom half is significantly larger than her torso by proportion. This painting also exemplifies the characteristic of Mannerist paintings in that it doesn't seem to take place at any particular time or place. The architecture isn't indicative of the time and location of Jesus' birth, and there aren't any identifying features. Not to mention the incredibly tiny St. Jerome immediately behind the Madonna. If Parmigianino wanted St. Jerome to have a higher level of significance than an ant, he did not achieve it. And why the Royal Academy of Art favors these kinds of paintings, I will never know. This is the exact artistic ideal that we should be fighting against.
Revolutions are happening all over France and the rest of Europe. The people are rising up along with Chartism, demanding their right to vote for their government. And we see this in religion, too. The people are filled with more religious fervor and they want to be more emotionally connected in their worship. Shouldn't we feel this way about our religious art, too? Shouldn't we feel more emotionally connected to our religious art? We don't feel emotionally connected to mannerism because we don't see humanity in mannerism. We see this skewed form of humanity, the supposed ideal form. So shouldn't the art that reflects our religion, shouldn't we feel more emotionally connected to it? If this is the climate and religious time that we're living in, shouldn't our art look something more like this?
The Pre-Raphaelite Brotherhood wanted their paintings and other pieces of art to be more realistic, depicting humans naturally, unlike mannerism, which often exaggerated certain features of and contorted the human body. To create more realistic figures, the PRB drew on techniques from the Quattrocento or Proto-Renaissance period, such as smooth lines, the use of shadow, and the introduction of perspective into the paintings. The use of these elements and techniques resulted in natural-looking human figures and made the art pieces more relatable to viewers, evoking more emotion. In Rossetti's painting, Behold the Handmaiden of the Lord, both figures are depicted in natural poses, not twisted with unequal proportions. Rossetti uses shadow and some perspective to help achieve the more realistic depiction of the figures in the painting.
However, while we believe that we should show our religious fervor in our art, many of our patrons did not agree. Consider the infamous example of Christ in the house of his parents, done by Millet. As you can see, this work shows a drastic departure from the norms of the time. While the Holy Family is idealized in modern art, the subjects in this work are much more realistic. Some of the most commonly cited complaints amongst our critics, yes, we're looking at you, Charles Dickens, include the supposed ugliness of the Virgin Mary, the blubbering of the ugly red-headed Jesus, the positions and gestures of the figures, and overall how dirty the scene appears to be. There are no pretty gestures or halos around the figures, simply a real look into a carpenter's shop. But, contrary to what the critics may have said, take a closer look at this painting. It got across exactly what it was intended to. From the religious symbolism of the wounds in Jesus' hands and feet, as well as John the Baptist bringing over a bowl of water to help address the wounds, to the exquisite detail throughout the piece, Millet accomplished exactly what this group was intended to promote.
And finally, all together,
to have genuine ideas to express, to study nature attentively, to sympathize with what is direct and serious and heartfelt in previous art, and to produce thoroughly good pictures and statues.